Hello everybody, I'm Jeremy Dickinson and I thank you all for watching. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Philosophy Clips. In this philosophy clip, I'll be braving the abortion debate. And in particular, I want to talk about really just the first few pages of Thomson's classic landmark 1971 essay, A Defense of Abortion. So the game plan in this video will be to just lay some foundation, do some conceptual work, and then turn my attention again to the first few pages of Thomson's paper. So basically I'll be getting through Thomson's Violinist Argument. So those of you who know the paper, you know that the Violinist Argument happens pretty early on in the paper. So I really recommend everyone track down her 71 piece and give it a read. There's so much in that paper that warrants discussion and that I will discuss, but this is going to require that this discussion of Thomson's paper be a multi-part series. So this will be part one of that series, and let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get after it. So the abortion debate. There's a whole lot that one could think about when thinking about the abortion debate. One could be thinking about the legal aspect of it, whether and what degree it should be permissible in a legal sense, and of course in the U.S. here it is permissible. Though many of you likely know that the legal permissibility has taken a hit, at least in several states here in the U.S. As of late. But there are also issues related to moral matters. So you might think about the moral permissibility, so the free choices that are made with regard to females having abortions, right? And those can be distinct from the legal. The legal notions of permissibility and impermissibility carry with them very often coercive connotations. But when it comes to the domain of the moral, we're making moral choices, and some of the choices could end up being impermissible, some of them could be permissible, as the case may be. Now, some of you might think that, well, the legal and the moral, they go perfectly hand in hand when it comes to thinking about abortion. And there might be quite an overlap between the legal and the moral on the abortion issue, but they do pull apart from each other. And one way of seeing this, it seems, is in thinking about the following apparent consistent pair of views. One could, it seems at one and the same time, hold the view that abortion should be legally permissible and widely so. They might think that the state has no right to force women with respect to what happens into their bodies. But such an individual might morally think that there's something at the very least problematic, morally speaking, with having an abortion. And so that seems to be a consistent set of views. That tells us that at least to some degree, in some ways, the legal and the moral can pull apart from each other. Now, I think that Thomson is thinking about both the legal and the moral in her paper. And so as this discussion of Thomson's paper unfolds, we'll see, I think, at various places where the legal and the moral are expressing themselves in her paper. Okay, so that's just some initial things to say. Some more by way of initial things to say would be, let's just consider like maybe a spectrum. And let's consider like on the ends of the spectrum, the extremes. And so there's the extreme, you might say, pro-life view, the view that would have it that abortion is always impermissible, either legally or morally. But on the other extreme, there's the view that it's always permissible, either legally or morally. So you have these extreme views that aren't probably the most popular, but they're extreme views and they're possible to hold, of course. But there are also, it seems like, more moderate views that are in the neighborhood. So you might have a moderate pro-life position, which has it that, by and large, abortion is legally or morally impermissible. But there are some cases, a female being raped, her life being in medical danger because she's pregnant, etc., as admitting of exceptions where we have permissibility. But by and large, the moderate pro-lifer, right, we all know what it means to be pro-lifer, is going to claim, okay, it's impermissible generally. But then on the other end, there can be, in contradistinction to the extreme pro-choice views, there could be more moderate views. Sometimes these views are called permissivist views. There are extreme permissivist views, extreme pro-choice views, but there's also more moderate views. There might be some cases in which it's morally or legally impermissible for a female to have an abortion, but it's generally permissible either legally or morally. I think that if I'm right, if my sense of things is correct, I've been teaching the abortion issue for a long time. Debates are very often between the moderates on either side, okay? Not the extremes, so there are definitely debates to be had there. So in contradistinction to the permissivist pro-choice view, there are the restrictivist pro-life views. Okay, so I'll sometimes invoke the permissivist and restrictivist terminology instead of the pro-life and pro-choice terms. So I just want to flag that because those terms just may slip out of my mouth in this discussion. But I think that's a nice segue to the Thomson, because the way Thomson ends up arguing is that something like the moderate pro-choice permissivist position is the correct one. The moderate side, the moderate views, right? She gives a case toward the end, as many of you may know if you've read the piece, that suggests that her position is a moderate one. She doesn't go all the way to the extreme. She doesn't seem like she has an extreme view. She thinks that's a benefit, a virtue, as it were, of her view. Okay, that it doesn't go all the way. And she's not trying to, in her paper, work out an account that's going to tell us in every circumstance whether or not an abortion counts as permissible or impermissible, again, legally or morally. That's not what she's up to. She's doing heavy-duty philosophical work here. Okay, she's doing the heavy-duty philosophical lifting, and the way I see, and the way I like to explain big picture what Thomson's up to is she's going to begin on the extreme pro-life side, and she's going to push the needle in the opposite direction to, all the way to, as I see it, the moderate permissivist, the moderate pro-choice position. That's where she's going to end up. But there's a lot of work that has to do in order to move the needle in that direction. She knows that she has some work to do over here to do with the extreme type views. Perhaps we can call them radical views. I don't know. But that's where she begins and moves the needle in direction toward the moderate pro-choice position. That's a big picture way of seeing what's going on in the Thomson. And so the paper really proceeds in that way. She proceeds by way of taking on the more stringent restrictivist views, and then it's not until halfway through the paper that she blows the door open for the pro-choice side that she ends up settling on. Okay, and again, it's the heavy philosophical lifting is the dismantling of the extreme views over here, and then developing that argument that blows the door open for the pro-choice position. It's up to others, perhaps her graduate students, I don't know, to work out more of the details. That's not what she's interested in. She's doing, again, the heavy-duty philosophical lifting in this piece. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. She's going to take on the radical views, so if we can call them those, the radical pro-life views. Okay, so let's go ahead and follow her a little bit. Let's just follow her. So she is going to end up claiming, look, there's a kind of standard argument that's out there that philosophers have run for their radical views, their radical pro-life views, and we can call that for purposes, if you want, the standard, we got a bug flying around in here, standard pro-life argument, and it goes something like this. Persons have the right to life. Okay, persons is kind of a technical philosophical term. It means those beings who have attained a certain status or have intrinsically a certain status that confers on them significant rights, significant moral status. So persons have the right to life. That'd be the first step. The second step, guess what? Fetuses are persons. Okay. The next step, the conclusion from these first two claims is going to be that fetuses therefore have the right to life. If fetuses have the right to life, then it's impermissible for females to have abortions. Therefore, it's impermissible for females to have abortions. And there you have a pro-life argument, and perhaps you run it to be as general as possible, as extreme as possible, as radical as possible, and you may run that to establish a claim that abortion is always impermissible, either legally or morally. Okay, so that's the standard pro-life argument. I think we've probably all heard a version of that argument at some point or other. What Thomson wants to say is, look, when we think about this argument, there's nothing wrong with that first premise. Okay, persons have the right to life. Second premise, that's where there's been a lot of debate. Thomson, she notes that there's been lots of debates regarding that second premise. In fact, that's been really the crucial premise. Thomson wrote her piece in 71, so in the time period that she's working and thinking about the abortion debate, that was a crucial premise. And so on either side, so the pro-life side would run arguments to try to establish that that fetuses are persons, and then the pro-choice side would come along and say, nope, fetuses aren't persons, and here's why. And there'd be lots and lots of debate between them. So in the abortion debate for a long time, that was taken to be the central premise. Whoever can argue for their view on that premise better is ultimately going to win in the abortion debate. That was widely accepted. And then, of course, once you move from the first and second premises, the third one you get for free. They claim that, therefore, fetuses have the right to life, and fetuses have the right to life. Then the thought would be, look, the right to life is a morally significant right. As such, it's going to outweigh, perhaps always, the right for the female to decide what happens in and to her body. And that's what's going to lead to the pro-life conclusion. Okay, so once it's established that fetuses are persons, then it's a short hop, skip, and a jump, it seems, to the anti-abortion conclusion. Okay, now Thomson, what she ends up doing, this is groundbreaking. This is why her piece is a landmark one. She ends up claiming, I'm going to grant you that second premise. Okay? Most pro-choicers would never grant that premise because they realize I grant that, I'm basically digging a massive hole for myself. Thomson says, I'll grant it, for argument's sake. Here's the way that Thomson would understand it. I'm going to grant that fetuses are persons for the sake of argument, but they're really not. So under her breath, in terms of what she really believes, she doesn't think that fetuses are persons, at least from conception. You do get the sense from reading the Thomson that she thinks that at some stage of fetal development, the fetus becomes a person, but it's not, at least early. So you can understand her as like, I'm going to go ahead and assume that the fetus is a person from conception, even though it's not, and go from there. And still show, here's the kicker, and still show that the pro-life conclusion doesn't follow. So now, the question is how is she going to do this? It seems like she's set herself behind the 8 ball. Well, her strategy, as we're going to see over and over again, is to develop cases. So she is a master at giving us cases, these thought experiments that help us generate arguments. So she likes to proceed argumentatively by way of giving example after example after example, where we have intuitions or very powerful judgments elicited from these thought experiments. But those intuitive judgments end up carrying with them persuasive arguments. Okay, so she develops the violinist argument. That depends on our understanding what the violinist case is. So she develops the violinist case in order to run the violinist argument. And the violinist case goes something like this. Imagine the Society of Music Lovers. They really want to save an unconscious violinist who needs your specific kidney in order to stay alive. So they kidnap you, they drug you, they bring you to a hospital where you're hooked up by way of your kidney to this violinist. You wake up, you come to, and you realize that you've been forced to be hooked up to this violinist. Okay, so if you were to unplug from the violinist will die. That's tantamount to killing the violinist. Okay, and you're told all of this when you come to, right? Now here's the question: Would it be permissible for you to unplug from the violinist, to demand that you're unplugged from the violinist? And Thomson says, of course, it'd be permissible for you to do such a thing. But now think about the features of the case for a moment. If you unplug from the violinist, you kill the violinist. That's what Thomson says. Thomson says you do something that amounts to killing the violinist. The violinist, though, is a person. The person has a right to life. So isn't the right to life morally more weighty than my right to decide what happens into my body? That's what the standard pro-life argument assumed. But it looks like our intuitive verdict in the case is flipped. My right to decide in this case is morally more weighty than the violinist's right to life. So it's not always the case that the right to life is morally more weighty than, guess what, the right to decide what happens in and to someone's body. So it looks like, in cases of rape, according to Thomson, females, their right to decide what happens in and to their body outweighs the the right to life of the fetus. Thank you all for watching. Part 2 is forthcoming.